Well, all I can say is thank God. Thank God that the courts of the United States feel that they are not controlled by the executive branch.
It's a political decision, and we're going to see them in court.
The president had a big loss in court and another round of distractions and drama.
Kellyanne has been counseled, and that's all we're going to go with.
Republican strategist and communications coach Adam Goodman explains what's wrong with White House communications and how to fix it.
How were you counseled?
I'm not going to comment on that, Martha.
Plus, our pollster Matt Towery explains why the president's approval ratings are all over the map and predicts a new challenge for Mr. Trump. And former director of intelligence operations at CENTCOM, E.J. Otero, breaks down the war on terror and our new potential partner, Vladimir Putin. This is Money, Power, and Politics.
And so another wild week. We have President Trump hitting more bumps in the road, but just like most presidents do their first few weeks on the job. That's what we're dealing with.
Yeah, Trump was a true Washington outsider, so it takes a little while to learn the inner workings of government. Former Presidents Clinton and Carter had particular bumpy moments when they got started as well.
They did, and Trump, to his credit, is getting stuff done, delivering on some things he said he would do. His problem goes back to an issue of communications.
Sean Spicer, our press secretary, gave alternative facts.
After coining the phrase to describe White House statements that do not add up, Kellyanne Conway defended the president's travel order by citing a massacre in Kentucky that never happened.
2 Iraqis came here to this country, were radicalized, and they were the masterminds behind the Bowling Green massacre. Most people don't know that because it didn't get covered.
And again, it didn't get covered because it didn't exist.
Go buy Ivanka's stuff.
Then, as an executive staffer who's banned from endorsing products, Conway went on national TV and gave what she called a free commercial for Ivanka Trump clothes.
Government officials cannot use their government office to support their private business interests.
I'm going to give a free commercial here. Go buy it today, everybody. You can find it online.
And that's how the counselor to the president got counseled.
She's been counseled on that subject, and that's it.
President Trump also pulled focus from his agenda by scolding Nordstrom for dropping his daughter's clothing line. And the senator who first revealed that Trump's own Supreme Court pick was speaking out against Trump's attacks on the judicial branch.
His comments were misrepresented, and what you should do is ask Senator Blumenthal about his Vietnam record that didn't exist after years of saying it did.
And while Trump said the account of Neil Gorsuch criticizing him is not accurate, Gorsuch's own spokesman said it is accurate, leaving Sean Spicer to say Gorsuch was referring to attacks against the judicial branch in general and not specific attacks from Trump.
That is literally the epitome of fake news.
Meanwhile, Sean Spicer hammered the New York Times for its report that claimed Trump has trouble concentrating on policy memos and is obsessed with home decor and spends much of his time watching cable news and fussing about Don Lemon and how his staff could not find the lights in the conference room and how Trump watches TV in a bathrobe, which drove Spicer specifically to deny the part about the conference room and the bathrobe.
I don't think the president owns a bathrobe. He definitely doesn't wear one.
Which then triggered a flood of old pictures on social media of Trump in his bathrobe. And along the way, Trump clashed with fact checkers again for misstating the murder rate and claiming the media is conspiring to cover up terrorist attacks.
It's gotten to a point where it's not even being reported. And in many cases, the very, very dishonest press doesn't want to report it. They have their reasons, and you understand that.
Sean Spicer repeatedly cited the Atlanta attack as an example of an underreported event, then realized he had the wrong city and said he meant the Orlando Pulse massacre was an example of an underreported event. Which brings us back to Trump's travel order the court shot down, which the administration has struggled to describe.
He's been very clear that it is extreme vetting.
Extreme vetting.
Calling for tougher vetting individuals from travelers from 7 nations is not extreme.
The ban.
It's not a travel ban.
This is a ban.
That's not a ban.
This is not a travel ban. This is a temporary pause.
We're going to have a very, very strict ban.
Because when we use words like travel ban, that misrepresents what it is.
Okay, let's welcome Republican strategist Adam Goodman once again. Adam, you are a communications analyst, an expert. You're also a supporter of President Trump. You must be worried about how he's communicating to the public and to his own administration this week.
Well, let's just say that not everything was on script, to say the least. And, you know, right now these communications really start to count. The most important things he has to do, the big things, you know, healthcare reform, taking on foreign policy with both hands, trade deals, the wall perhaps. These are things that are going to start to become sacrificed if he doesn't take care of the little things, and some of the little things this week became big.
You talk about counteracting. President Trump goes on to say that it's been 47 years since the murder rate has been this high.
Interesting fact.
But it's not.
Right. I think what he's with Donald Trump. I mean, we certainly saw this during the campaign. We're still seeing this, obviously, in terms of his presidency. His intention and his central message are right on point. Sometimes I think he has to be a little bit cleaner about how he puts together the information behind it. But there's no question that there's a concern about crime in this country. Chicago, for instance, he talks about it a lot. That's something that's completely, it seems to the outsider, as well as people living there, out of control. And he wanted to communicate, we had to do something about it. And I think in terms of communications, the entire team needs to spend a little bit more time, I think, tightening it up. But in terms of being on message, the message itself, the bigger message, I think they've been there from day one. I mean, America's woke up the day after the election to a person who's just fundamentally going to do things differently. And I think we are adjusting as much as they are.
It's getting him in trouble to a certain extent. So then what would you advise him to change as a communications expert yourself?
Well, this is where, you parse every word. Every moment has momentum and meaning that it didn't have perhaps during the campaign. In campaigns, we feel a little bit freer to be able to riff a little bit, meaning try things out, test market things. This is not a place really to be test marketing because this has everything to do with the fate of this country. I hope they're learning from this and that we're going to see a tighter ship moving forward.
Adam Goodman, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, well, the Ninth Circuit would not reinstate the president's travel order. President Trump could write a new order that ramps up security while complying with the court order. But either way, he'll appeal this week's ruling. Minutes after the decision, in true Donald Trump fashion, he took to Twitter saying, "See you in court. The security of our nation is at stake." Later, he went on to say to reporters, "This is just a decision that came down, but we're going to win the case." And his Supreme Court nominee, Neil Gorsuch, could be the deciding vote, and he may have improved his chances of getting confirmed by what he said this week to Connecticut Senator Richard Blumenthal. He said that Gorsuch called Trump's attacks on judges demoralizing and disheartening. Again, the White House said Gorsuch was not specifically referring to Donald Trump.
And then you have Trump's tweet against Nordstrom that started a controversy that could play out for at least a little while longer here because Nordstrom said it dropped Ivanka Trump's clothing line due to falling sales. Trump tweeted, "My daughter Ivanka has been treated unfairly by Nordstrom. Great person, always pushing him to do the right thing, terrible." And then this was followed up by Kellyanne Conway defending Ivanka Trump by promoting her clothing line on TV. And so did President Trump's counselor break ethics rules here when she told people to go out and buy Ivanka's stuff? Well, the short answer is yes, it appears as if, in fact, she did.
Yeah, the Republican chair of the Government Reform Committee said it was wrong and needs to be looked into. But the bottom line here is the one who could punish her is her boss, President Trump. And he's not going to do that. In a private meeting, the president told her that he backed her up, quote, completely.
Okay, we have a lot of ground to cover. Coming up, we're going to show you how the president can face some new roadblocks in the U.S. Senate. And our pollster Matt Towery breaks down the president's approval ratings. Colonel E.J. Otero explains how the war plan is coming together at CENTCOM.
So President Trump controls both chambers of Congress, but he could lose some key votes in the Senate.
Because he has a very slender majority there that he could be risking by antagonizing fellow Republicans like John McCain.
5.5 years as a POW, and you call him a dummy.
This is not the first time President Trump has attacked John McCain.
Because I don't like losers.
So when he called McCain effectively a loser this week, it sort of falls in line with what Trump has said before.
He's a war hero because he was captured. I like people that weren't captured, okay? I hate to tell you.
But in continuing to attack McCain, Trump runs the risk of losing support that he needs to get anything done in the Senate, because Republicans only have a 4-seat majority in the Senate. And if you alienate McCain, you cut that down to 3.
I don't like losers.
And when you alienate McCain, you also run a high risk of alienating his close friend Lindsey Graham. And what did Graham say about Trump?
He's a race-baiting, xenophobic, religious bigot.
Let's just say his majority could be cut down to 2, assuming he gets Ted Cruz to fall in line, which based on history alone may not be easy.
I tell you what I really think of Donald Trump.
And what exactly did he think of Trump?
This man is a pathological liar. He doesn't know the difference between truth and lies.
Anything else?
Listen, Donald Trump is a serial philanderer. Describes his battles with venereal disease as his own personal Vietnam. If anyone has seen the movie Back to the Future 2, the screenwriter says that he based the character Biff Tannen on Donald Trump. A caricature of a braggadocious, arrogant buffoon.
Yeah, so if Trump's not careful, his majority could tick down to 1. And then there's Marco Rubio.
If he hadn't inherited $200 million, you know where Donald Trump would be right now? Selling watches in Manhattan.
Remember, Rubio called Trump a dangerous con artist who would do catastrophic harm to his party and pose a serious threat to the future of our country.
He is a con artist. You all have friends that are thinking about voting for Donald Trump. Friends, do not let friends vote for con artists.
And while Rubio did say all those things in the heat of a campaign, Rubio also says he stands by all of it. So you see where Trump's 4-seat majority could whittle down to 0, and his attacks against his own party may not be doing him any favors.
All right, coming up, our pollster, Matt Towery, shows us how the Republicans in the Senate gave a gift to the Democrats, and we'll take a closer look at the changes in the war on terror.
Well, 2 of the president's most controversial cabinet picks were confirmed this week. First up, Betsy DeVos for Secretary of Education.
And Tom Price was later confirmed as Secretary of Health and Human Services. He'll be in charge of the repeal and replacement of the Affordable Care Act, which we'll discuss further later on in the show.
Okay, the week's most dramatic confirmation, of course, goes to Jeff Sessions, our new Attorney General.
Yeah, it set up a showdown between Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and Senator Elizabeth Warren over the words of Coretta Scott King.
Coretta Scott King also wrote to the Judiciary Committee about the Sessions nomination in 1986. And this is what she wrote.
Mitch McConnell scolded Elizabeth Warren and stopped her from reading that letter. And in hindsight, that may not have been his best move.
She was warned. She was given an explanation. Nevertheless, she persisted.
To McConnell's point, there is a Rule 19, and it does not allow a senator to attack or rip another senator. And since that letter from Coretta Scott King strongly criticized Jeff Sessions, who was technically still a senator, you could say that Warren, yes, did break the rule.
We have rules around here, and the rules are very clear that you don't impugn another senator. Now, you can't do that in your words, and you can't do it with writings.
But McConnell's punishment amplified her argument and drew much more attention to the letter he did not want her to read.
Okay, let's bring in our pollster, Matt Towery. Once again, thanks for joining us.
Sure.
So why in the world would Mitch McConnell deliberately turn Elizabeth Warren into a martyr?
Insider Senate politics. I mean, this is, Craig, a classic case of gotcha. He had the opportunity. They knew that she was violating the rule, which technically she was. But when you're talking about Coretta Scott King, you're always better off to leave that alone, because it just became an opportunity for Elizabeth Warren to get additional publicity and to raise money. And she's raised a lot of money off of it just a day or two after those statements, just in that time period. So it was a mistake, I think, on the part of McConnell.
On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the dumbest thing you've ever seen, how stupid was this?
Oh, I'd give that about a 6. I've seen a lot of stupid things.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's make sense of the polls, if you can make sense of the polls. What is Trump's approval rating? It's in the low to mid, maybe high 50s. If you look at Rasmussen, it's in the low 40s elsewhere.
Yeah, Real Clear Politics average has him down about 5 points. In other words, 5% disapprove more than approve. That's probably about where he is. We're having trouble these days with polls because the methodology that was used in the weighting system did not work in the general election, so I really don't have any reason to think that it's really improved during this post-election time period. It's sort of like everybody just said, oh, well, the polls were wrong. Let's go back to looking at the polls.
You called the election for us.
Yes.
Well before the election. Everybody else said it was a slam dunk for Hillary Clinton. So give us a prediction now, something else nobody else is seeing.
I think you're going to see Donald Trump and Congress start to butt heads relatively soon. I think they've got a time period right now where they need each other, but Congress works at a slower pace. Trump clearly does not, and I think you're going to see, as we get into the spring, the bloom off the rose, so to speak, and you're going to start seeing some fighting within Congress and the presidency. It's inevitable. I mean, go back to Jimmy Carter even. He went to Washington, D.C., was going to upset the apple cart. Who was he fighting with most of all? His own Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill. I think it's coming.
Matt Towery, thank you for your time.
Absolutely.
All right, well, this week, the president met the team at CENTCOM that plans and coordinates the war on terror. In just a moment, we'll bring in Colonel E.J. Otero to explain what's happening behind the scenes. But first, Craig has a look at our options in the war on terror.
We will ensure that the men and women of our military have the tools, equipment, resources, training, and supplies you need to get the job done.
The president also wants to provide more military support to our partners while making sure military equipment does not fall into the wrong hands. That also takes planning and communication with CENTCOM. And as Trump plans to ramp up the war against ISIS, he also put Iran on notice. So he needs to make sure the planners at CENTCOM know exactly what that means and what our next steps in the region will be. He also has to discuss how to coordinate more missions with Russia and how our allies in NATO will continue to work with us.
We strongly support NATO. We only ask that all of the NATO members make their full and proper financial contributions to the NATO alliance, which many of them have not been doing.
Okay, let's bring in Retired Colonel E.J. Otero, who, by the way, was a former intelligence director of operations at CENTCOM. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me here.
How do you win the war on terror?
The military is a little constrained at this point because they're re-identifying what sources are available. How many troops are we going to need? We're looking at different options. When President Trump stopped by last Monday, one of the things that he told the command is, give me a plan. And even though the command is always working on a plan, when the president comes to your building and he tells you, give me a plan and this is what I'm looking at, it acquires a life of its own.
President Trump has said before that teaming up with a country like Russia would help fight this war on ISIS. Is that a feasible thought?
Well, there's two ways to look at it. There is the political, in which they're bad guys. They have done a lot of horrible things. Vladimir Putin, he has his paws and blood all over the place. And many other things he's done are not nice with journalists and so on within Russia. And that is true. The issue is, who do we go to fight a war? Because we already abdicated Syria and we abdicated the Middle East when we did not do anything after we threatened Syria not to use chemical weapons. We already told Iran, it says, do not test missiles or we're going to do something, but we never did. They did 12 launches, we never did anything. Syria, they used chemical weapons again, we never did anything. The Russians took over control of the theater. So the United States needs to decide, are we going to appeal to an informational relationship with the Russians, which we should have anyway, or are we going to be a partner fighting ISIS? But then when you say, I'm going to be a partner with ISIS with Russia, who runs the show? Because the rules of engagement for the United States are totally different than Russia's. And every time that we have partnered with Russia in the past, we have learned that in not a good way. How is that going to be sorted out in the next few months? I don't know. But you cannot say no completely. There has to be a discussion with the Russians if the objective is to eliminate ISIS.
Colonel Otero, thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
All right, coming up, more changes in the plan to replace Obamacare. We'll show you why the president said it may take much longer than he planned last month. With Health Secretary Tom Price sworn in, the Trump administration can get to work on the repeal and replacement of Obamacare.
But there's a but. It may take much longer than the president originally said.
We're going to be submitting, as soon as our secretary is approved, almost simultaneously, shortly thereafter, a plan.
The administration said it was the top priority. And Vice President Pence reportedly set a goal of passing a plan and sending it to the president's desk by February 20th.
The first order of business is to repeal and replace Obamacare.
Trump said he was already working with Price on it and that it was almost finished.
Trump says his plan to replace Obamacare is almost ready.
But then watch what happened when Congress asked Tom Price if that was true.
President Trump said he's working with you on a replacement plan for the ACA, which is nearly finished and will be revealed after your confirmation. Is that true?
It's true that he said that, yes.
And then the president said something very different to Bill O'Reilly. He pushed the timeline from as soon as Price is approved to maybe sometime next year.
In the process, and maybe it'll take till sometime into next year, but we are certainly going to be in the process.
And with that, he appears to have moved the goalpost from what he said last month.
So as soon as our secretary is approved and gets into the office, we'll be filing a plan. I think that, yes, I would like to say by the end of the year, at least the rudiments, but we should have something within the year and the following year.
Pushback because Republicans don't agree on what the final replacement should be. That's going to take some time. Took Obama more than a year. It's going to take Trump more than a year to replace it.
Yeah, and I think he's learning that things take a lot longer than he had originally planned or hoped for.
That's right. Folks, thank you so much for joining us. That's our show. We will see you again next week for another round of Money, Power, and Politics. Take care.